What's going on, everybody? AQW here. Thank you so much for joining me. And yes, you read that title correct. And just a couple days before Astra Malorum comes out, I would like to explain why Ashes of the Damned is in fact my new all-time favorite zombies map. I know it's only been a couple of weeks, but I think I can make my case here about why this map is so unique and jam-packed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my review of Ashes of the Damned. If at any point you find yourself enjoying this video, a like, comment, and subscribe are always appreciated, but without further ado, let's get into it. To start, and probably the most obvious thing to point out about this map, is the vast aesthetic improvement compared to BO6. There is so much more color and vibrance to be had in just this map alone compared to, I would argue, anything that was in BO6. And yes, Terminus and Citadel and even the nexus point of the tomb are absolutely gorgeous, but there's just something about how even the skybox casts itself over this grandiose map. The colors and vibrance really lend themselves to an experience like this where you are constantly traveling and going to each of these POIs. And speaking of POIs, I love that each of them are incredibly distinct and unique from one another, even down to the unique zombie models depending on what zone you're at any given time in the map. And this, along with all of the intel scattered around all of these places, really lends itself to telling a unique story depending on where you're at. Whether it's the horrors of the Van Dorn family on their farm and the mysterious vault of flesh in the basement, to the burning western town of Ashwood that was once home to our warden antagonist character. And if you haven't collected all of the intel around all of these different POIs, I would highly urge you to, as there's something to be said about a sort of story that you can lean on while you are in each of these spots. For instance, when I'm in Blackwater Lake, I'm constantly reminded and thinking about Dean Roth and his horror movies and what went wrong with them as I am in that location. Even the fog sections get some love in this area, with the cabins in between Blackwater Lake and Ashwood. Like, I'm constantly thinking about where did these cabins come from, what is their story, or the massive corpse of an Orda that sits just outside the diner, bringing up even more questions. All in all, this map is absolutely dripping in atmosphere and storytelling all throughout, and I think that's something we've been lacking in the past couple entries of zombies. Now, moving on to the Wonder Weapon, I totally predicted that this thing would be phenomenal. We already knew it looked absolutely sick, and I think its power even surpasses that of what I thought it would be. And I would go so far as to label this the most unique looking Wonder Weapon, as well as an extremely unique utility. Just the look of it alone kind of reminds me of a Daedric Gauntlet from Skyrim, if you guys have played that, along with this skull on top that has this cryptic text, which I don't think has been deciphered and may even be something that's not meant to be deciphered, but it just looks absolutely gorgeous and sort of edgy in a way, but not too edgy, you know what I mean? But the absolute power on this thing, it has a very strong melee attack just at base. The spikes you are shooting out actually deal pretty decent damage, I would say, considering that it's not its main form of damage. But when you recall these spikes, you're not only able to pull in power-ups and overheal, which is this whole new factor to the game that I won't go into too much here, but you are also able to deal this immense amount of power that I think we have been wanting for quite some time now in a unique way. For instance, the jet gun in BO6, while it is very strong damage dealing, it's something we've kind of seen before in, of course, the original jet gun and like the die machine, and all of these things together really help it stand out compared to, I would say, any Wonder Weapon we've ever had in, for instance, tight scenarios and even the boss fight when you need some extra health. And of course, the quest to get this thing, the Necrofluid Gauntlet, is very easily replicable. I would argue once you've done it once, you've done it 100 times. It is very easy to do over and over again, which I think is something we want for a Wonder Weapon quest. And going back to storytelling, this quest also leads you to different POIs, giving their own sort of narrative as you're collecting all the pieces to get this thing. Of course, you have to visit Klaus from Der Toten in his cell in Ashwood, leading to questions about how he got there. I know he speaks on it a little bit, but I feel like there is some mystery still to that. You actually visit the Vault of Flesh where you can find the weapon at Van Dorn Farm, leading to some questions about that as well. You have to fight the recently seen Uber Klaus at the Janus Tower spawn location. I just love how this quest takes you through all these different stories that seemingly aren't very connected, but it really does give this quest just that little bit of extra oomph. And of course, old Tessie, I would say, is done absolutely phenomenally here compared to the inspiration from Transit. You get your entirely mobile pack-a-punch machine right on the back, which has never been done before. You get the throwback to the DG2 with the turret you can install on top. And of course, the Abomination carcass you can collect and install, which leads me to certain questions. Like, if it's a carcass, how is this thing still moving around and shooting beams? Just something really cool to consider about it. And of course, all of these pieces have their own immense utility as you're playing on Ashes of the Damned. The Abomination carcass able to munch through zombies that even get near the front of the vehicle, as well as shoot their beams to blast these purple crystals, which have awesome loot inside. And the turret, of course, also being able to shoot these purple crystals, but also utilized very heavily in the main quest. All in all, old Tessie is done very well here, and while you can kind of lean on it to get out of sticky situations, you are still in plenty of danger, as the boss fight shows you when you're in this thing. Now we'll move on to some of the brand new special enemies on Ashes, starting with the Ravagers. I absolutely love this high-octane music that plays on their unique rounds, as well as the cuteness that is bringing back the round-to-end music from the old days. I'd say these things absolutely trump anything we thought to see in the Vermins. Even their little growls and other sounds they make are incredibly distinct from anything we've ever seen. I absolutely love it. And even though they are able to steal your loot, which I would say is their main selling point, I have found incredible utility in these guys being able to do so. And that is actually letting them munch on any of your unwanted loot to convert it into salvage. Especially in the early rounds, these guys can give you a ton of extra salvage right at the beginning. And this of course begs the question at what biological process allows them to do this, but I digress. And I would say this utility in letting them convert things into salvage is extremely unique compared to any other special enemy like this that we've seen before. When you really think about it, special enemies like this were only able to give you things like power-ups. Of course, the Hellhounds and Vermin and whatnot giving you max ammos at the end of their rounds, the monkeys on Ascension, and even to an extent the monkeys on Shangri-La, allowing you to get perks and other power-ups. I really can't say there's been anything quite like the Ravagers in this way. And I appreciate how subtle that aspect of them can be. It's really strategy without having to go too much out of your way. You kind of just let them do their own thing and you benefit from that. And I would love for any zombies lore person to go in depth on these things and figure out why they are the way they are, how they're part humanoid, part creature, whether they are actually creatures from the comics that we thought that they would be, and maybe dig deeper onto the biology of these things and how they're able to convert these into salvage. All in all, I absolutely love the Ravagers, and I'm fine that they will seemingly be appearing in at least Astra and maybe so on in BO7. Now, I've said it once, so I've said it 100 times. My favorite elite enemies are the ones that the game doesn't let you ignore, if that makes sense. And that is absolutely the case with the Zursa Bear in BO7. And it's very reminiscent of my favorite elite from BO6, the Uberklaus, in the way that you are punished for not giving it your full attention. And this is why Abominations ranked so much lower for me in BO6, is you were kind of able to lessen your attention on those, as you could kind of just run away and maybe get hit by a stray beam or two, but you were able to kind of let them do their own thing and not worry about them as much as the Zursa. And I think this really all boils down to these enemies having the perfect trifecta of health or bulk, attack power, and speed. As in, these are the three things that really make them hit extra hard. And of course, this can be adjusted for things like overpowering the health to lessen the attack power and the speed, for instance, George on Call of the Dead. But I would say these types of enemies are at their best when these three things are balanced correctly. If you think back to Brutus on Mob of the Dead, or the Panzer on both Origins and DE, these three things fit perfectly. Even to a point where it's not just tweaking numbers, but things like having high health can be reduced nicely when you know, for instance, weak spots. And to draw this comparison a little further, I would look at something like the flamethrower on the Panzer, and I would compare that heavily to the damage over time effect we see from the Zursa. Or the stunning electric shots that the Uberklaus shoots out, very much like the DE Panzer. And I think that's why things like Brutus and the Panzer are so heavily regarded, because they fit this trifecta perfectly. And so, of course, personally, I would lump the Zursa into that group. It is done phenomenally. Not to mention the design of the Zursa also aesthetically fitting very well with the fact that it's almost like a very wooded area kind of all throughout Ashes of the Damned. 10 out of 10 elite enemy, and I cannot wait to see what they do with Oscar on Astra Malorum. And I can't speak about Ashes without bringing up the immense amount of side Easter eggs featured on it. Of course, you have the Zursa mini boss fight in the forest and the TV twins to get the free Wisp tea, even being able to concoct your own perk out of different ingredients you find around the map at a soda machine, but none of these compare in the slightest to the unique Dempsey side Easter egg. And I know a sort of similar sentiment was felt with the Maya side Easter egg on Citadel, but this one goes above and beyond and really gives you that interesting backstory to our brand new Tank Dempsey character. And I love that. And I love being able to compare and draw distinctions with this version of our Aether crew compared to the previous iterations. Just a couple other things to hit on before we get to the really juicy stuff. I would say these spores fit phenomenally, as it's the sort of flora and fauna you would think to see in something like the Dark Aether. And I think the fact that these things are like directly biologically influenced from the Dark Aether kind of makes sense with the rewards you see from them. For instance, things like Essence, Salvage, and Perks all have these deep ties to what we consider to be the more magical aspect of the Zombies universe, and therefore it is tied very heavily to something like the Dark Aether. It's just a nice little touch that not only grants even more utility around the map, but also kind of fits the narrative that I think they're telling. And of course, Trials making a comeback with the TED Trials, the absolutely phenomenal change that not only I feel like the quests are a bit better, but the ability to get perma perks, which is just another throwback idea to BO2, which this game is heavily inspired by. This, along with the fact that it almost makes Perkaholics even stronger in this game, being able to go straight for all the perma perks you want, I think it is a great change for BO7. Now on to the main quest. I would say the biggest highlight of this quest is the fact that it utilizes the entire map space extremely well. And in getting the Wonder Weapon and going through the rest of the quest itself, you are visiting all of these different POIs and hearing these different stories about things multiple times throughout it. For instance, you not only have to visit the diner a first time to obtain the Abomination carcass, but then you have to visit it again and go through this frozen lightning step that is so beautiful. Or going to the Cosmodrome to not only obtain this canister to get the Wonder Weapon, but also to go back and stop these arrays from spinning and then launch the freaking rocket. And I absolutely love the touch of the music that plays when you launch this rocket. It's phenomenal, and I love hearing it every single time it pops up on one of these maps. And while this quest did take so long to solve, I think it clocked in at around 9 or 10 hours, which is huge for modern zombies. The best quests are in fact the ones that take a long time to solve, but are very easily replicable, just like the Wonder Weapon quest as well. Now to finish off with the very controversial aspect of this map, which is the boss fight. Just to start with, there is something so unique to be said about the fact that this announcer that you're hearing every time you pick up a power-up is then who you are fighting at the very end of the quest. It's a very subtle thing, and the only hint we get towards that is actually in that Dempsey side Easter egg, where if you have subtitles on, you are able to see this boss's name before you fight him. And just the design of this thing is absolutely so gross. It's this massive fleshy creature, which I would point out seems very tied to the Dark Aether as well, with how many similarities it shares with the Margwas and Mimics and Abominations, with that very peculiar face on its face. And this gives me even more questions about the biology of the Dark Aether, and it almost hints at some sort of evolutionary tree perhaps, where this thing is a main entity and things like Abominations and Mimics are what spawned from it. And not only this, but the main gameplay itself of the boss fight is probably the most unique we've ever had, with being extremely reliant on our vehicle, old Tessie. Now, of course, they infamously nerfed this boss fight because of how difficult it was, which, for the record, I was against, but it is still extremely engaging and cinematic and just grandiose in scale, and I think that's all we can really ask for in a boss fight, regardless of its difficulty. And while many people argue that BO7 is almost just this year 2 of BO6, I would say they fulfilled the idea of swinging for the fences on their launch experience extremely well. I mean, when you think back to maps like Transit and Shadows, they were so different from anything we had ever experienced at that time when it first came out. And there's absolutely something to be said about how these launch maps almost are so attached to the identity of the game that they came from. For instance, for many people that think of BO3, the first thing that comes to mind is Shadows. I know the first thing I think of when I think of BO2 is Transit, even though it is highly disregarded as a strong map. They're just so unique and distinct, and you could even argue this for Kino with BO1. Even if Kino is maybe even my least favorite map on BO1, it is in fact the first map I think of when I think back to that game. Even today, when you think back to BO6, probably the most likely thing to come to your mind is either Terminus or Liberty Falls. It is ingrained in the identity of the game, and Ashes of the Damned will no doubt be that for BO7. And to conclude, if you haven't noticed, I have very little, if anything, negative to say about this map. And if I do have anything negative to say, it is most likely a game issue and not a map issue. In my opinion, Ashes of the Damned is damn near a perfect zombies map. And while time may change that sentiment, whether softening or hardening these feelings, today, Ashes of the Damned is in fact my favorite zombies map of all time. But how does Ashes of the Damned rank to you guys? Are we entering a new era of greatness for Call of Duty Zombies? Or is this just regurgitated Black Ops 6 slop? Comment down below, let me know. I read every single comment and I would love to engage with you guys about what makes this map so special or not so special. But anyways, thank you guys so much for sticking till the end. If at any point you found yourself enjoying this video, a like, comment, subscribe are always appreciated. But until next time, I've been AQDevi, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.